Hi, Michelle. It's great to have you with me today. I know it's been a little while, and we were able to meet back in November at a mastermind, and we had a brief conversation trying to connect, and we did after that and ran into each other. Anyways, it's great that I was able to meet you then, get to know a little bit more about you, and have you on this podcast. So, if you wouldn't mind just sharing with everybody like who you are, and what you're passionate, what you're doing today.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Michelle Jewsbury, like John said, and there's a couple of reasons why we ended up meeting at a mastermind and why I'm now sitting on his podcast. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a small town in Idaho and moved around my whole life. And then I ended up wanting to pursue something even more. So that's something even more when I was like 19 was to move to Hollywood, California and be a movie star. So I packed my bags and I went to Hollywood, California, and things were going well. I was starring in plays and films, and I thought that I was on my way to success. And then I ended up meeting somebody, this blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy who swept me off my feet. I thought that this was going to be my fairy tale love romance. My mom and my dad raised me to see them, and they had this wonderful love story, and I so badly wanted something like that. Well, the first time Paul put my head through the wall was about 4 months into the relationship. And unfortunately, the abuse escalated where I had 4-hour-long beatings. I experienced all forms of domestic violence in the 4 years that I was with him: sexual, emotional, psychological, physical, and financial. And when I escaped that relationship, I started to document my story. So write my story. And when I read that back to myself, it was like, wow, how is this me? And I felt a calling to do something more. So if you're listening to this podcast and if you've ever felt a calling to do even more, take that calling. So I ended up writing and performing a 65-minute solo play about my experience in domestic violence. And then people started coming up to me and telling me their stories. That's when I founded a nonprofit organization called Unsilenced Voices. We began in West Africa, so starting in Ghana, expanding to Sierra Leone, where the bulk of our programming still is. We've done work in Rwanda, fiscal sponsor for an organization in Nepal, and we gifted about $33,000 to USA survivors in 2022. And then I started speaking and coaching and wrote my first book in 2019 called But I Love Him. And then while on that journey of speaking, I started to discover how many individuals have a story that they should be telling as well. And I shouldn't say should be, because we never should on ourselves. However, I highly encourage people to speak up about their experiences. And I think that's the only way that we can stop a lot of the injustices that happen, is that we openly talk about some of these things through transparency and honesty. And we've cultivated a system, cultivated a collaboration with people through book collaborations and public speaking opportunities and course creations, do a lot of coaching. So through group coaching called Legacy Camp, and then a lot of private coaching. But it's really all about telling your story like I have. So thanks, John, for letting me be able to tell your audience what I do.
Yeah, that's great. So you dove into a little bit of some stuff back there. So if you don't mind just sharing a little bit more about your journey, you had some abusive relationship and whatever happened in that relationship, feel free to share what you like. And then we can just go from there. I do have some other questions after that then.
Okay. Yeah, no, that sounds good. When I'm on a lot of podcasts, they wanna know how I was able to go from being a victim at that time in a very, very abusive relationship to now using that as my story and catalyst really to help other people. And while I was involved in that situation, I had no idea what I was experiencing. My mom and dad never yelled at each other, let alone raised their fist to one another. So when I was there, I remember the first time he pushed me through the wall and my head went through it. And I remember stepping forward and looking behind me and just seeing the indentation. It was a large indentation. I just thought, well, I got to patch that. I didn't think I needed to run away. Because I didn't experience DV growing up, because I had no idea what it was, I literally thought, well, maybe he was upset. Maybe he was triggered by something I said. Maybe it was my fault. And I started to internalize a lot of that. The words that he used made me feel like I was the one at fault. And I ended up staying. And through all of the abuse, every single time afterwards, especially a physical beating, he would sit with me and he would cry and sob and tell me how sorry he was and how he promised he would never do it again. Well, there's a vicious cycle in domestic violence, and unfortunately it goes from walking on eggshells to a big blow up to then the apology stage and then the honeymoon stage and then walking on eggshells, and it's over and over and over and over again. And until I finally broke free from that, did I really discover how bad the relationship was. Seriously, when I was writing it down and read it to myself, I was like, whoa, this is not okay. But I didn't actually see it until afterwards. It's very, very strange coming from me now, like looking at the past. I know what it is, but while I was there, it was just survival mode.
Yeah. What would you say caused you to start writing it down?
My therapist. So when I finally broke free and left, there was a large part of me that wanted him back. You see, narcissistic, codependency, the oxytocin in my brain, right? I so badly wanted the relationship back. And I was like, why can't he just be fixed? So I started going to therapy and started to discover, some childhood things, some things that I believed about myself and others, which caused me to stay in that type of relationship. But my therapist said, well, why don't you just start to write? Journal is really what he said. And when I started to write, it literally did come out in a play format, which then I turned that play format into my book, But I Love Him.
Interesting. So what's that? So that play, you did a performance? Were you in it?
Yeah. I wrote and performed a 65-minute solo play. So it means that me on stage by myself for 65 minutes, I performed, I want to say 14 different characters, but I think it was a little more than that. So it was 65 minutes of dialogue. So yes, with blocking and music and all of it. So I hired a director, and I would call her more a script analyst and director. And we came together and we wrote this script, and I performed it in 2016 at the Hollywood Fringe Festival and earlier at the Whitefire Solofest. So
is that the only two times you did it?
So let me think. At the Hollywood Fringe Festival, I think I performed 3 or 4 different times, and then the Whitefire was just the one. And then after I performed at the Hollywood Fringe, that was roughly summer in 2016. I dropped the manuscript and I headed to Italy. So I literally went on a vacation to kind of decompress because it was really heavy. I beat myself up on stage. I really showed what it looks like to be in a very narcissistic, abusive, Jekyll and Hyde type of domestic violence relationship on stage.
Well, what kind of feedback did you get from that?
When I remember when I did the first play, and that was at the Whitefire. That was February, I think, was my debut that same year, 2016. And afterwards, when I finished, I stood there and it was dead quiet. You literally could hear a pin drop. And I was like, oh no, did nobody like this, right? I just busted my butt for 6+ months rehearsing, and then the claps and applause came, and it was good. There was a lot of people who started coming up to me after that, and I didn't realize that was going to position me as an expert in the DV space, but it did, and that's what happened. And so people started to trust me more because I was very transparent and authentic as to what happened, and they started telling me their stories, and that's when I was like, oh my gosh, it's so bad what happens. And it's not just women. So statistics in the US, 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men experience domestic violence. Worldwide, 1 in 3 women. And this isn't including childhood abuse. A lot of people don't understand that the little boys who have experienced childhood sexual violence turn out to be adult men. And oftentimes they're not able to speak about what they've gone through because it's a taboo subject. And I know even in our summits that we host, it's been very difficult to find men who really want to openly talk about this. And I'm actually really excited that for our Volume 2 Breaking the Silence book collaboration, which will be published October of 2024, we have a man who is telling his story about sexual trauma that he experienced. And I think that when we are able to openly discuss some of these injustices, some of these things that happen to us, then we can stop the repetition, the cycle of abuse, whether it's domestic violence or human trafficking or other types of trauma. But it takes both men and women to speak up about this. This is not a women's rights issue. It is a human rights issue. And I think that we need to work collaboratively in order to express ourselves and be able to tell our stories in a safe space.
Yeah, so it took you some time to open up, right? And so what would you say it would take for people to open up, like anybody?
Yeah, I mean, my mom raised me to be a strong, independent woman. I've always been kind of feisty. A lot of people were very shocked when they found out that I was in such a violent relationship. It wasn't verbal, just verbal. It was many other things. And I stayed, and a lot of people didn't understand why. So when I left that abusive relationship and started documenting, it really didn't take me that long afterwards to start speaking up. He trapped me financially, so I sued him, and I meant to sue him so that he would just pay off the bills. I had no idea when my attorney looked at him, looked at me, looked at everything that happened, he wanted to really sue him for civil damages that he's done to me. And we went through this lawsuit and then ended up settling out of court. So really right from the get-go, I was an open book. I remember sitting in deposition. My abuser hired a female attorney to interrogate me. And it was like 6 hours sitting there in deposition. And it was so hard. And Paul was sitting across from me. And after that, I knew I need to take my power back. And in order to take my power back, I had to start speaking. And that's really kind of where it led me to hiring a coach. My very first coach I hired the end of 2018 and started telling that story. And I escaped in the end of 2015 is when I hired an attorney, and we didn't actually settle everything until 2019. So during that time, one of my requirements was that I was still able to speak, because I wasn't going to take that out. Now, I never can say his real name, but outside of that, the settlement was pretty fair. And I'm actually to a point now where I really hope and pray that he is doing better, and that he doesn't hurt anybody again, that he's getting the help that he needs.
Yeah. Does that take a lot for you to say something like that?
Not now, but in the beginning, yeah, for sure. In the beginning, I remember the first draft of my book, and I ended up writing that book feeling hatred and vile, right? I was just so angry with him. And I had to do a couple of rewrites. And then I remember sitting in the back of church just crying many, many times. And when I saw his face in person, especially during deposition, because I only saw him a couple of times during our entire court case, I kind of felt bad for him. And then it got to a point where, now I forgive him, because I know that this is very cliche, but hurt people hurt people. And if you don't get the help that you need, it can come out in one of three ways, really. But the main two is you can either be a victim or become a victimizer. So yeah, it's, I have a feeling, one day we might run into each other. I travel a lot. He's in similar circles. I have not seen him. I haven't seen him, like I said, for many, many, many years. But I do wish him the best. And if I did see him in person, I've always said this. I want to walk up to him and say, "Hi, my name is Michelle Jewsbury," and shake his hand and watch the blood run from his face. But that is kind of mean.
Yeah, and for the chances of that happening, who knows, right?
Yeah. But yeah, forgiveness is key, because forgiveness is not about the other person. It's about you. So if you are unforgiving, you're literally walking around with your fists closed all the time. And if you forgive, then you're literally opening it up, giving it up to God. My God is Christ, right? And giving it up to him and living your life. God can only bless you and give you opportunities if you are willing to accept the challenges, if you're willing to accept what he's offering. But if you walk around closed, you can't accept anything because you are full of hatred. So forgiveness is key. And I know we're going off on a tangent here, John, but it definitely is something that stands out to me.
Yeah. No, and sometimes you have to fall apart to get back together again, and you have to release a little bit, right? And accept the things for how they were, and how much better they can be, even though you might not see that, right?
Yeah.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard. And so what would you suggest to somebody that might be going through this or have gone through this to kind of like open up a little bit and kind of reach out to maybe somebody like yourself or something?
Yeah. Find a supportive community is number one. So under my brand, Michelle Jewsbury Speaks, we have a very supportive community, whether it's through book collaborations, whether it's through Legacy Camp or speaking opportunities that we provide. We do a lot of virtual events, but they're all with individuals who have overcome some type of adversity, whether it being domestic violence, sexual abuse, human trafficking, depression, anxiety, disease, suicide, homicide, addictions, you name it, all of these ailments that inhibit us from growth. You find a community where you're able to actually express yourself, talk about what happened without other people telling you it was your fault. See, that's the biggest thing, is it was never your fault. All of these ailments I'm talking about, it's not your fault. There's traumas that we experience. There's reasons why we stay. So find that supportive community. Seek help. I personally really, really am an advocate of actual therapy, like talking therapy, but a lot of people aren't. So use a different modality. It could be dance therapy. It could be writing, just taking a piece of a pen, this is a pen, not a piece of paper, but a pen to a piece of paper and start writing out stream of conscious. It doesn't have to make sense, but just get it out of yourself. And understand that you're not alone. There are so many individuals. There's 8 billion people on this planet. Over 50% of people experience adversities. That number is quite low. I believe it's way higher than that, because 50% of entrepreneurs experience a mental health disorder. So there's a large amount of individuals who've experienced violence and adversities and traumas, and know that you're not alone, and your voice can actually help somebody else to heal. So oftentimes we stay silent, and if we stay silent, then it could actually encourage other people to stay silent. And when that happens, then it's repeating a cycle of abuse over and over and over again, because if nobody knows what's going on, then nothing's ever going to change.
Right. You're right. No, that's great advice. I appreciate that, you sharing that. And that brings me to like a little story. I'm not going to mention names or nothing, but like 2 weeks ago or whatever, I was with 3 other people, and 2 people I had no idea who they were. Sat across from this guy and just asked him what he was doing. They were, all 3 of them were doing something that whole day. I wasn't part of that group. But anyways, he just started telling me his life story pretty much. And we were there for like 2 hours. And I'm like, did you tell anybody else this before? And he's like, just my therapist. I'm like, well, no. But, the whole time he was all about just like, I'm grateful, I'm glad you're listening or whatever. And the other 2 people could listen too. They're right there. But it was to me, I want to share a little bit about that, because it's amazing how many people have problems, but they don't open up, especially to maybe strangers, afraid of what they might think or what might say, right? And there was not much I said. It was pretty much asking questions, and he just kept coming back, and I'm not kidding. It was like 2 hours. It was the whole dinner, but Yeah, but I mean, so I'm sharing it because I think a lot of people out there should open up a little bit better and not be afraid about what other people think and say. Um, and it would be the people, like you mentioned, the community and stuff. There's a certain people out there that would allow that to happen, safe space.
Yeah, and I share a lot of stages with a lot of people, and this is where I'm definitely not going to do any name dropping. But there are individuals that I've met that say one thing in front of the curtain and another thing behind the curtain. And it's time for us to replace those people. It's time for us to show that authenticity, transparency, honesty, adversities, that is what matters the most, that we can actually wrangle people together and make the changes that are necessary for the planet, for the world, for the people, for animals. I mean, you name it. When we are open, and it's only through our openness can we make that change. So thank you for sharing that, John.
Yeah, no problem. And you're going to make me talk a little bit more here. And to go to some of these events, just like you said, I was at one, and it was basically everybody sharing the story and just letting it go. It wasn't like no sales pitch or nothing like that, but it was just letting it out there. And those are the groups of people you have to find and connect with. And, I know you have friends, I have friends that are probably great people, but they're probably not the ones, you want to hang out with the most and share everything with sometimes, and that's for everybody, but, yeah, you have to open up. And I feel like it's slowly coming around. I don't know, maybe you would agree that, people are opening up a lot more than...
It's a lot more accepted these days, for sure. I mean, you say, back in the 1990s even, that's, man, I can't believe sitting now, that's 35 years ago.
Old.
But I mean, and this is evergreen. So somebody could be watching this in 20 years from now and go, oh my gosh, that's so old, so long ago, right? But we couldn't speak up. I mean, you have to think women couldn't even buy their own home without some man to co-sign for us in the 60s. It was looked at like, what are you doing as a single woman? And now singlehood is embraced. I think the pendulum has swung too far the other direction for the Me Too movement, but we're not in that discussion right now. However, some things will teeter down and we will be able to speak, and it's going to be something that's just a normal discussion.
Yeah, you're right. So we go through these cycles, I mean, I'm sure we'll come back around to where some things were the way before they changed.
Yeah.
So you did the play, and now, so go ahead, share again what you're doing with to help out communities and stuff across overseas.
Yeah. So with Unsilenced Voices, I'm very excited. We do a lot of work in Sierra Leone. So early this year, which is 2024, our episode on the Fixers TV show was aired. So we are season 4, episode 2 of the Fixers. And the prior year, we ended up flying to Sierra Leone and building a cassava processing plant for one of the villages that we support. And we were able to do that with the help, of course, of the Fixers. And that is helping to bring some financial security and economic well-being to the village, but also to the neighboring villages. And a lot of the people that we work with in Sierra Leone, there's no running water, there's no electricity. Many of these villagers have never even been outside of their village, let alone go to school. So it's really interesting seeing the dynamic of, I mean, in first world countries, the haves and then the have-nots. And it's very unfortunate because I believe we really can bridge that gap. There's enough resources, there's enough money to be able to do that. But in Sierra Leone in particular, we deal with a lot of the sex workers. So a lot of our sex workers are young girls. I mean, one of our girls is 12 years old, right? And it's just gut-wrenching that they feel like that they have to go to the streets because that's the only way that they can feed themselves and their children. I see 13, 14-year-old girls with kids because of the sexual violence. And that happens in first world countries as well, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot more resources in the United States than there are in Sierra Leone. So we help the girls go through vocational training. We've got to sponsor a survivor program. You can literally go to sponsораsurvivor.org and you can sponsor a survivor for $100 a month. pays for vocational training, training materials, monthly stipend, medical and counseling. We do savings box programs in the villages we support. We help with planting of seeds and harvesting. We do a lot of education. So we hold a sex education meeting once a month, and it's usually with the sex workers. And our next goal is to be able to build a school with a day center and housing component. So we really need a housing component because a lot of our girls, although they stop sex work, there's nowhere to live. So they stay stuck in the brothels. And unfortunately, they keep getting reoccurring STIs because of the cleanliness of the brothel, not because of sexual activity. So we really need to get them out of there. And in order to do that, we need to build the school and day center and housing component. And here in the United States, we'd really like to be able to build a day center with wraparound services and emergency housing. In Sierra Leone, I'll give you a price comparison. What we want to do there is about $150,000. What we want to do in the US, about $2.2 million a year. So there's a huge discrepancy there. But yeah, it's education, resources, and providing support, making them feel like that they aren't alone, that they can overcome. And then, we did a 4-city tour in 2022 focused on the 4 main cities and hubs for human trafficking in the USA, which is Dallas, Tampa, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas. And with my personal brand, we really, really love teaching what's called Legacy Camp, which was an 8-week course. We're turning it into a 12-week course, so it's more intense. We just actually launched that, which is quite exciting, but it's group coaching to help you turn your story and transform that into books, public speaking, and courses. So it's kind of helping you to monetize your story. And then we've got a book collaboration called Breaking the Silence, Voices of Survivors. Volume 1 hit #1 bestseller, and we are, moving forward. Volume 2 will be published October 2024. Volume 3, October 2025. We're currently looking for Volume 3 authors, but we will be doing this anthology every single year. So if you're listening to this in 5 years, we will still be doing an anthology. So contact us. You can find me at michellejewsbury.com. Again, Michelle Jewsbury, MichellJewsbury.com. So yeah, we love, when I say we, live on a small team right now, but we love helping and serving. And I love seeing clients go on and do the same. So Jamie was one of my very first coaching clients, and we worked together for 3 months, and she was just coming out of a homeless shelter, escaping domestic violence. And then now she's working on changing legislature in Houston, Texas. So it's amazing to watch the progression, and she's using her voice to make a difference.
That's great. So I might not say the town or the country right, but Sierra Leone, is that how you...
Sierra Leone. Uh-huh.
Got it. So is there a reason why you chose that place?
God. I mean, that's all I have to say. So when I was young, I used to have dreams about me surrounded by a bunch of African children, and I didn't know why. I didn't even find Christ until 2010. So when I was younger, I didn't know what that meant. So when I moved to Los Angeles, this was 2000 again, I moved back and forth a lot, but again, this was 2014, I think. I started to look for somebody who could help me. I mean, I was still kind of going back and forth with my abuser. So when was this? Anyway, I looked for an organization to help that worked in Africa. I thought that I was just going to be working for an organization or working with an organization. So I ended up volunteering on Skid Row for a little while, the Downtown Women's Center. I volunteered for an organization that worked out of Sierra Leone, but specifically for school. But I came in and I was vice president for a little under a year, helped them to grow a bit from there. And then when I left that organization and really felt compelled to start Unsilenced Voices, I knew Sierra Leone was on my heart because I actually hired the manager that worked for the other organization that they fired because I love Philip and he's great. but we've got a really great team that I can count on in Sierra Leone and Ghana, where we actually started. I had met a Ghanaian doctor and we started talking, and he said, please go to my hometown and see what you can do. And I packed my bags and I flew over there. So that's kind of how it started. I just kept saying yes. And then Rwanda kept contacting me. So there's 2 different organizations in Rwanda that we worked with for a while. Now we're more of a fiscal sponsor for those organizations. But yeah, they contacted us and we worked on some projects together in Rwanda. So that's how we chose Africa.
Great. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So Michelle, I asked the same question to everybody at the end. So what are 3 key things you've learned and used along your journey?
3 key things. Let's see. Don't be too hard on yourself. Everything is a journey. There's this woman who came off of stage one time, and this was early on when I began my speaking career. I don't even remember who it was, but she left her mic hot. So means that she was off stage and you could still hear her talking. And somebody asked her, well, can you really have it all? Because she said that you could have it all. And her answer was very interesting to me. She said, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. So take your time, right? Do one thing at a time, and understand that life is a journey, right? It's a journey. It's not a marathon. And to really believe in yourself is the next thing, right? Make sure to believe. And I guess what would my 3rd thing be? Never give up. You know, failure is just a stepping stone closer to where you're going to achieve or what you're going to achieve. There's a book by John Maxwell called Failing Forward. I love this book, but it really does talk about how every step forward, you're going to fail somewhere. And if you don't have enough failures in your life, you didn't try enough things. So keep failing so that you can reach where you're supposed to go. And just never give up. A failure really is a pivot point. It's like, oh, well, that didn't work. Let's try something else. It's same thing in like branding your business. That didn't work. Let's try something else. Pivot, test and tweak, test and tweak. And then, John, I always end every podcast and speaking engagement the same way. So if you don't mind, I'd love to give this as well. So there is a movie called Finding Nemo, and I'm sure you've heard of this. So I'm sure right? Finding Nemo. And in that movie, of course, Nemo gets lost and trying to find his dad and all this stuff. Well, there's a fish. Her name is Dory, played by Ellen DeGeneres. And Dory doesn't remember things after, I think, 10 seconds. But she always gets lost. But the one thing that she sings to herself all the time is just keep swimming. So just keep swimming and just keep swimming. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
That's great. Yep. And you don't have to tell me how many times I'm failing. So I'm working, always moving forward. So no, I appreciate everything you shared with us, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you, John. I'm glad we finally got together.
Same here. Thank you.